This kite, LazyDog, I made for the purpose of having a simplified kite, easy to make, fun to fly, and quick to make. And it can be made with a variety of different materials. In the description below, I have a PDF that is in detail all the dimensions and all the information you need to make the kite and or make the template or both, whichever you want to do. Now, I use tissue paper and matchstick bamboo. Matchstick bamboo I got from a roll-up shade, and it had hundreds and hundreds of these sticks in it. So I have a couple of these sticks for the spars. One of them is 21 inches long for the bow, and the other is 15 3/4 inches long for the spine. The tissue paper I like is called bleeding tissue paper. It's bleeding because if you layer several sheets of it together of different colors and put water on it, the ink that colored the tissue is water soluble. So it bleeds into the next layer and the next layer and so on. So you can make some very interesting patterns with it, and random patterns or planned patterns, either way. But it's really fun to do. So that's why I use this. But tissue paper is relatively fragile, especially when you're outside flying a kite. This kite can be flown outdoors in light wind or indoors. And we'll talk about the differences that are needed in order to accomplish either one. But to make the kite, what I did was I spread out my tissue paper on my cutting mat, put my template on it, drew around it with a marker. After I drew around it, I then took a ruler and extended the leading edge from the nose to the wingtip to define this hem tab right here for holding the bow. After I did that, I used Scotch tape, well, a cheap facsimile of Scotch tape, and applied it to the sail material before I cut the sail out. I put the tape along the trailing edges on both sides so that the tape, even though this tape's about half inch or maybe a little wider, I put about a 1/4 inch wide on the inside of the line of the kite sail on both trailing edges, because the trailing edges get an awful lot of flutter and wind damage if you don't do that with a material that's as fragile as tissue paper. Along the nose, the leading edge from the nose to the point where this bow hem begins, I did the same thing, but I made it wider, about the width of the tape all the way, because here it also gets an awful lot of abuse from the wind. Then what I did was the outline is drawn, and when I do that, I also mark where the spine goes, and I mark, as you might be able to see here, where the wingtips are. So I mark the wingtip line from wingtip to wingtip and the spine, nose to tail. Now the wingtip line isn't really that important, but the location of the wingtips is important. So I mark those when I draw around it. Now, after the tape's on, I then cut the sail out. Now this is just laying on my cutting mat. And I didn't do anything to smooth it out other than just to press down on my template. Now, when I cut it though, I use a ruler. Because the lines here are straight, it's quite easy, and I use an X-Acto knife, but you could use scissors to work just as well, because you're cutting it out without any of the spars attached. And with these bamboo matchstick spars, you could also use as a sail material a lightweight plastic, for example from a garbage bag or from a shopping bag. It would work just as well as this and be more durable and more waterproof than this is. This is not good in humid weather, that's for sure. This is a sunny day or indoor kite. That's what this is, with a tissue paper. So I cut along there, and when I come to the tab, I just freehand the curve because it isn't all that critical. The only thing that's really critical is that when you're making the kite sail, that whatever occurs on the left or right side occur equally on the other side of the spine. As long as they're symmetrical, the dimensions specifically as indicated on the plan are not that critical if they're close. And let's face it, just the width of a marker line can be interpreted by one person as one dimension and another person differently. So those kinds of differences are going to occur. But just use the best effort you can to make sure that the left side and the right side of the spine are identical. If you do that, even though the rest of the dimensions aren't exact to the plan, the kite will fly beautifully. So I cut that sail out. Now, one of the things I did was I made a mark right here about a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch in from the wingtip on the tab. That tab is for securing the bow to the sail. Now, I made that mark on both sides and I cut it so that my knife came from a line that continued from the nose to the wingtip. I just extended that with a ruler like this on the tissue paper and drew a line. And then I cut this little tab right here. So now I'm ready to install the bow, and I install the bow first. The bow is 21 inches long. The spine is 15 3/4 inches long. So I take the bow, put it up against the line of the leading edge, and I put glue stick glue on the tab and on the tip of the bow. Then I roll that over and press it down on the back side of the sail. So now I have a stick that's secured by a little bit of a tab and it's sticking out about like this. So then, after it dries, and it takes just a few minutes, then I bend it in the way that I want it and bring it to the other side and do exactly the same thing. Put glue stick glue on the tip of the bow and on that little tab that's right here. After that's dry, then I put glue stick along the remaining part of the hem tab right here and fold it over so that it's folded on the line that I drew from the wingtip to the nose. And you can see here that the bow is below or inset from the leading edge right about here. And I want to keep it that way. After that dries, I want to put the spine in. And the way I do the spine is a little different. I use the glue stick on the spine itself. I just put the glue stick on the spine. I lift up the bow, slide the stick under, press it down at the nose, and line it with the line I drew that indicates the spine. Align it to that, press it down so it sticks good. But sometimes, because the bow is in, when you do this, the sail material might be a little bit wrinkled because of the tension created by the bow. So while the glue is still wet on the spine that you just put in, I turn the kite over, press down on the nose, and press along the spine, pulling the sail tighter and removing those wrinkles. Once that's done, there are a few additional places that need reinforcement in order to make the kite more durable. One is the nose. At the nose, I don't care how good a flyer you are, you're going to crash. And the nose takes a lot of abuse during a crash. So I put a piece of Scotch tape that is basically close to square right at the nose on the back side of the kite. So it's wrapped around the spine at the nose and is lined up with the leading edge. I also put a piece of tape at the nose on the front side here and fold it over to the back side. Both of those help the durability. The next thing I do is take a small piece of tape and wrap it around the bow at the wingtip. What this does is it eliminates the possibility that the kite line you're using when you're flying the kite gets caught and stuck right there and rips the sail, especially on something as fragile as tissue paper. This could happen quite easily, or any other paper for that matter. One paper I've used and really like the way it handles is paper used for covering model airplanes. It's a little stronger and much more durable and works really well, and I've used it on several kites. But I also like this bleeding tissue paper just because it's a little different. So I put the tape here for reinforcement. I put it on the other side as well. Then I put another square piece or thereabouts over the spine, press it down on both sides to hold that in place at the tail. Now I measure up 5 inches, which is where my lower bridle connection will go. I put a piece of tape right across that point across the spine in order to minimize the bridle from creating a bigger tear in the sail than what is required to get it through. Because when I make the bridle, I use a darning needle and just thread the line I'm going to use for the bridle through it, and then just puncture through the sail and the tape and tie it. Makes it very simple and very easy But if you didn't have the tape there, there's a very good chance that the sail material, whether it's a plastic bag or whether it's tissue paper, it's going to tear. So I do the same where the upper bridle is connected. I put tape, I measure 1.5 inches from the spine on each side. That's the point where the upper bridle connects to the bow. I put Scotch tape just below the bow, lift it up, put it on both places. I use my toothpick to do that. I just put the tape, sticky side down onto the toothpick and slide it under, press it down very quick. And I tied the bow to the spine here. And I also put a piece of tape right here across the spine for the same reason, to protect it from when I put the needle through to get the line to tie it together. It won't tear any worse than just that little hole from the needle. Now this is a 3-point bridle. I like them, and they're really handy when you're making a kite like this that's sort of organic, I guess you'd say, because the tension on the right and left side of a piece of matchstick bamboo is probably not going to be exactly the same. And to compensate for that, you can do two things. You can adjust it by massaging it and working it with your hand to weaken it if it's too strong on one side, and or you can adjust the bridle location of the upper bridle to compensate for it. Either way. So a 3-point bridle is really a big benefit. Now if you're going to fly this kite indoors, and I have flown this one indoors, it's best to have the spine straight or just the very tiniest bend so that the nose doesn't raise any more than about a 1/16 of an inch when you hold down the tail portion of the kite with the kite face on the table. Hold that down. This should not rise up more than about 1/16 of an inch for indoor flying, or be totally flat, one of the two. But when you are flying it outdoors in light wind, then from about the wingtip line, right here, from about this point, you want to make a little bend in the bamboo. And you can do it easily with just your hands, and it'll stay pretty much like that. And you want it to be, when you press down on the lower bridle point on the back side of the kite on a table, this should be raised up about 1 inch or 1.5 inches, something like that. Now it's a good place to start, and when you fly the kite, you may want to adjust that bend one way or the other, depending on the wind, if you're outdoors. So the other thing that can happen is that the spine, depending on the bamboo you have, might be a little bit too flexible in the lower section. If that's true, then, and really it's ideal if it's stiff, you want to add an extra piece of matchstick bamboo. Just cut it, put it one on each side, and tape it down. And do that. You'll have to retie the lower bridle to go around these, but that will give you a much stiffer point of the lower spine, which will give you a little better tracking. The other thing is the point of static balance for this kite is ideal around a 1/2 inch from the wingtip line, about a 1/2 inch or maybe a little more towards the nose, right about in here, very close to the wingtip line, but towards the nose from it. That will give you the best results. And if you don't have that, you can just add a little piece of putty or something to the tail or the nose, whichever is the wrong weight. Now this kite's easy to fly, so if you're relatively new to fighter kite flying, this would be a good one to fly. It flies relatively slow and therefore a little easier to maneuver when you're newer. But if you're brand new, then cut a strip of either tissue paper or a plastic bag that's about a 1/4 inch wide and about 3 feet long. Tape it to the back side of the kite as a tail. Put a tail on it, and when you fly the kite will be a lot more stable and give you a better feel for getting the adjustments right. And then you can just cut the tail shorter and shorter, and you'll notice that the response of the kite changes as you do that. And so you'll gradually learn the behavior of the kite without having to learn it all at one time. I hope this has been useful for you, and check out the PDF that's in the description below that has all the details, and it should provide everything you need to make the kite and or make a template. And you can make this kite using carbon fiber as a bow, with tissue paper, or with any other sail material you want, whether it be Icarex or Orcon or polyfilm or a garbage bag. It wouldn't matter. So you could use any of the materials. If you use a carbon fiber bow, I would use a 0.04 inch diameter carbon fiber rod for the bow if you're using tissue paper or a very light plastic bag. This would work good indoors, and it would work well in very light wind outdoors.